Good morning, Year 3. We're going to start this morning by looking at our Maths Learner's Book, okay? So we're going to be looking at our Learner's Book pages 103, 104, and 105. But before we start this, make sure you have completed the self-check page on page 102. For the previous unit. Okay, so that's the page that is showing on the screen right now, and that's a page for you to do by yourself to make sure that you can understand everything from unit 8. So this morning we're going to start looking at unit 9, handling data and problem solving. So we're going to start with 9A, sorting numbers and shapes, on page 103. So if everyone looks at the Explore section, the box at the top of page 103, we can see that there are two shapes here. There are two large triangles in the shape, okay? So what we're going to look at is how many small triangles can you see in each picture? How many of them are red? How many of them are white? Okay, so these pictures of the triangles, they are a growing pattern. So if we imagine that the first one, which is made up of 4 different small triangles, is number 1 in the pattern, and the second triangle, the larger triangle, is number 2 in the pattern. How many triangles would you need to make the next picture in this growing pattern? How many red triangles would there be in the next shape? How many white triangles would there be in the next shape? If we were to continue with this growing pattern, how many triangles would there be in total in the 10th shape? So have a think about that. Okay, moving down the page, we're going to look at properties and sorting. Okay, so all numbers and shapes have different properties. Okay, different numbers and different shapes have different properties, and we can sort them into groups. We can sort them into groups depending on the properties that we have. So what you're going to need to do on a piece of blank paper is to copy out these tables here. The first one is odd numbers and even numbers. So hopefully some of you can remember what odd numbers and even numbers are. So an even number is any number that can be divided into 2 even groups. So 2 groups with the same number on both sides. So one example of an even number is 4, because if you have the number 4 and split it into 2 groups, then we would have a 2 and a 2. And one example of an odd number is 7, because if we had the number 7 and we split it into 2 groups, there is no way that we could have an even number of numbers on each side of that group. So 7 is an odd number. The second group we're going to look at is numbers that are a multiple of 5 and numbers that are not a multiple of 5. So for this group, it's very important to remember what we learned in our last module about remainders. So if a number is a multiple of 5, it can be divided by 5 without any remainders in it. Okay, so one example of a multiple of 5 is 10. 10 is 2 5s, okay, and it can be divided by 5 without any remainders. The third group we're going to look at is 2D and 3D shapes, okay, and I'm not going to explain this too much because we spent quite a lot of time last semester going over 2D and 3D shapes, and I'm sure a lot of you can remember many examples of all of these. So what we need to do here is, on a blank piece of paper, a plain piece of paper, draw out 3 charts with these headings: odd number, even number, multiple of 5, not a multiple of 5, 2D shape and 3D shape, and to write 3 items, 3 examples under each of the headings. Okay, page 104 what we're going to have to do is to draw some more tables. Okay, so we're going to have to copy out the tables that are here in number 1. So the first one is shapes that have 4 sides and shapes that do not have 4 sides. Okay, so this one of the columns has already been done for us. So we can see in column 1 we already have A, B, H and I. And this table here, it is about some shapes which are here further down the page. So we can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different shapes here that we have to sort into these two groups, that have 4 sides and do not have 4 sides. Then what you're going to have to do is draw a second table which divides the shapes up into shapes that have curved sides and shapes that do not have curved sides. A third table which is shapes that have an even number of corners. So remember, the corners are here, they're at the edges of the sides. An even number of corners and an odd number of corners. And the last table is shapes that you know the name of. So maybe you know the name of shape A, so you can write it in this column here, but maybe you don't know the name of shape B, so you can put shape B in this column here. I do not know the name. Okay, so you need to divide these shapes into 4 different tables with 2 headings on each table. Okay, so for part number 2, we're going to do some drawing. Okay, so you're going to need to first, for A, draw a shape that has 4 corners. B, draw a shape that has 4 corners and all 4 sides the same length. C, a shape that has 4 corners and all 4 sides are different lengths. D, a shape that has 4 corners and opposite sides the same length. And E, a shape that has 4 corners and no right angles. When you finish this, you can do the try this part of the page if you have some construction materials. So these are things that you could build out of matchsticks or toothpicks or modeling clay or plasticine or Play-Doh, or even paper or cardboard, so like the nets of 3D shapes we made before. You could make one of these shapes out of construction materials, and find someone in your house, someone in your family. Do not let them see the shape. They have to close their eyes and work out what the shape is just by their sense of touch. On page 105, we're going to learn about something called a Carroll diagram. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to look at this Carroll diagram here, and we're going to think of some animals to go in each section of this Carroll diagram, 2 animals to go into each section. So with the Carroll diagram, it helps us to sort things into their properties much more easily. Okay, so in the columns at the top here, we have 2 categories: has legs and does not have legs. So in this column, we put animals that have legs. In this column, we put animals that do not have legs. But there are two boxes in each column, and that's because we have to divide them into rows as well. Animals that live on land and animals that do not live on land. So can you think of an example of an animal that does not live on the land and has legs? So one example I can give you for an animal that has legs and does not live on the land is a crab. Okay, a crab lives in the water and it has legs. Okay, so I need you to think of 2 animals that could go in this box. Okay, but don't use crab because I've already given you that example. Then you have to think of an animal that lives on land but does not have legs. So Can anyone think of an animal that lives on land and does not have legs? I'm sure there's many examples that you can think of for that. An animal that lives on land and has legs. Okay, so there's many animals that live on land and have legs. And an animal that does not live on land and does not have legs. So for each of these boxes, you need to think of 2 animals to go in there. And then have a think about, where would your favorite animal go? So think about your favorite animal and think, where would they go on this carol diagram? And then if you want, you can think about any other animals that you might know that don't fit into any of these categories. So there may be some other animals that that cannot fit into these properties on this diagram. So have a think about that as well. What I forgot to mention, Year 3, is because we have the complete tables on this page, it's okay to write your answers on the pages of the learner's book here. Okay, on page 105 there's enough room for you to write your answers in here. So we're going to have a look at another carol diagram. This time it's not about animals, but it's about shapes. Okay, shapes that fit in different sections. So all of these shapes here, you can see they were all named this time. So maybe you can use these names to help you with the earlier work as well. We have a right-angled triangle, a pentagon, a hexagon, a rectangle, a nonagon, a square, an octagon, a kite, and a parallelogram. So the categories that we need to sort these shapes into on this carol diagram are shapes that have an odd number of sides, shapes that have an even number of sides, shapes that have fewer than 5 corners, and shapes that have 5 corners or more. So if a shape has more than 5 corners and an odd number of sides, then you will write its name in this box here. If a shape has fewer than 5 corners and an even number of sides, you will write its name in this box here. Okay, so by the end you should have all the names of all 9 of these shapes in your box here. Okay, good luck.